I've never been one to make a scene. 68 years of life had taught me that dignity often means silence in the face of insult. My father, a stonemason who built half the foundations in Bridgeport, Connecticut, had drilled that into me since I was old enough to carry his tools. A man who loses his temper loses twice, he'd say in his gruff voice, calloused hands resting on my small shoulders. But there are moments when silence becomes its own betrayal, when the weight of unspoken truths grows too heavy to bear. For me, that moment came on a sunny Saturday in June at my grandson Michael's 10th birthday party. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. Michael was the bright spot in my increasingly solitary life, a curious, kind-hearted boy who somehow managed to inherit my passion for building things despite the genetic distance. His mother, my daughter Caroline, had married into money 6 years ago. Her husband, Richard Davenport, came from old New England wealth, the kind that inhabited the Gold Coast of Fairfield County, with ancestral estates and trust funds that ensured generations would never know financial hardship. I'd worked hard all my life. Stevens Construction had been my creation, my legacy, a mid-sized commercial contracting business that employed 37 people at its peak. We specialized in medical facilities and office buildings throughout Connecticut. Nothing glamorous but solid, dependable work. The kind that let me put Caroline through Yale and buy a modest four-bedroom colonial in Stratford, where my late wife Margaret and I had planned to live out our retirement years. The financial crisis of 2008 changed everything. At 61, I watched as projects evaporated overnight. Clients couldn't secure financing, development stalled, and my company, built over 35 years of 70-hour weeks and missed family dinners, began bleeding money. I mortgaged everything trying to keep my employees paid while we weathered what I thought would be a temporary storm. It wasn't temporary. By 2010, I had to lay off most of my staff. By 2011, the bank took the commercial property where I'd operated for decades. By 2012, Margaret's cancer returned, more aggressive than before, and any financial resources we had left went to treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. When she died in 2013, I was a widower living in a rented two-bedroom apartment, driving a 15-year-old pickup, with little more than social security and a fraction of what our retirement should have been. Caroline had been sympathetic at first. She and Richard invited me to holiday meals, called occasionally to check in. But as years passed, the invitations became less frequent. My financial situation became an uncomfortable reality they preferred to ignore. The embarrassing family secret that didn't fit with their country club memberships and summer homes. I pulled my old Ford F-150 into the circular driveway of Richard and Caroline's Greenwich estate, feeling immediately out of place among the luxury vehicles, gleaming BMWs, Mercedes, and Range Rovers belonging to the other guests. The truck had served me faithfully for almost 20 years, but the rusted fender and faded paint stood in stark contrast to the manicured perfection of their 5-acre property. For Michael's gift, I'd spent weeks in my small workshop, meticulously crafting a wooden treasure chest. It wasn't just any box. The joinery was dovetailed by hand, the lid featuring a complex mechanical locking mechanism that required solving a puzzle to open. Inside, I'd created a false bottom with another hidden compartment. It was the kind of gift you couldn't buy in a store, something I hoped would spark his imagination and become a cherished possession for years. I'd wrapped it carefully in simple blue paper. I couldn't afford the fancy gift wrapping services the other guests used, and attached a card explaining how to find the secret compartments. As I carried it toward the backyard, where the party was already underway, I felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. Would it measure up among what were sure to be expensive, store-bought presents? The backyard had been transformed into what looked like a professional carnival. A massive bounce house in the shape of a pirate ship dominated one corner. A hired magician performed for a circle of captivated children. Servers in crisp white uniforms circulated with trays of elaborate hors d'oeuvres. A long table displayed a towering cake designed to look like a medieval castle, surrounded by professionally wrapped gifts in coordinating colors and ribbons. "Dad, you made it." Caroline approached, champagne flute in hand, air-kissing near my cheek. At 42, she looked like she'd stepped from the pages of a luxury magazine, blonde hair perfectly highlighted, designer sundress accentuating her yoga-toned figure, diamond tennis bracelet catching the sunlight. Wouldn't miss it, I said, smiling genuinely. Whatever tensions existed between us, I adored my grandson. Where's the birthday boy? Over with the magician. He's been waiting for you. There was a slight edge to her voice, the unspoken accusation that I was late, though I'd arrived exactly at the time stated on the invitation. I brought him something, I said, gesturing to the wrapped package. Caroline's eyes flicked to the blue-wrapped box, her smile tightening almost imperceptibly. You can put it with the others, she said. We're opening gifts after the magician and before the cake. I nodded, making my way to the gift table. Placing my handmade treasure chest among the professionally wrapped boxes from high-end toy stores and boutiques, I felt a moment of doubt. The other gifts looked expensive, the latest gaming systems, designer clothes, even what appeared to be a small motorized kid's car in a giant bow. Frank, good to see you, man. Richard's voice boomed behind me. My son-in-law clapped a hand on my shoulder with practiced bonhomie. Tall, tanned, with the easy confidence of someone who's never worried about money, Richard had always treated me with a kind of patronizing affability, like I was a quaint relic he tolerated for Caroline's sake. Richard, I nodded, shaking his outstretched hand, quite a party you've put together. Nothing but the best for our boy, he said, surveying his domain with satisfaction. Speaking of which, come meet some of the other parents. The Whitmores just got back from a month in Tuscany. They're building a villa there. Right up your alley with the construction background, eh? Before I could respond, he was guiding me toward a cluster of people holding wine glasses and laughing at something surely hilarious. I recognized some of them from previous encounters. Caroline and Richard's social circle consisted mainly of other wealthy couples, executives, hedge fund managers, and the occasional minor celebrity. Everyone, this is Frank, Caroline's father, Richard announced, as if introducing an exotic specimen. Frank built commercial buildings before he retired. Frank, you know the Blakes and the Hendersons, and this is James and Eliza Whitmore. I shook hands all around, noting the fleeting eye contact and quickly fading smiles. These were people who measured worth in square footage, vacation properties, and investment portfolios. A retired contractor living in a rental apartment barely registered on their social radar. So Frank, James Whitmore said, swirling amber liquid in a crystal tumbler, Richard says you were in construction. Any thoughts on Italian building methods? We found them frustratingly slow compared to our American contractors. I specialized in commercial projects in Connecticut, I replied. Can't say I know much about Italian residential construction. Shame, he said, interest already waning. The craftsmanship there is exceptional if you can tolerate the timeline. We finally had to bring in a project manager from London to keep things on schedule. The conversation shifted to the merits of various European destinations, recent renovations to vacation homes, and private school applications. I stood silently, occasionally nodding, increasingly aware of my outsider status. These weren't bad people, necessarily, just operating in a world completely disconnected from the one I inhabited. Grandpa, a small voice cut through my thoughts as Michael spotted me from across the lawn. He broke away from the magician's audience, racing toward me with unrestrained joy. There's my boy. I knelt down to receive his enthusiastic hug, the genuine affection washing away my social discomfort. Michael had his mother's eyes and my wife's gentle spirit, a combination that never failed to tug at my heart. I was watching for your truck, he said earnestly. Mom said you might not come. I glanced up, catching Caroline's tight expression as she approached. Of course I came, I assured him. Wouldn't miss your big day for anything. Did you bring me something you made? He asked, eyes bright with anticipation. Previous birthdays and Christmases had featured my handcrafted gifts, a wooden train set, a detailed dollhouse for his sister, a miniature workbench with child-sized but functional tools. You'll have to wait and see, I winked, but I think you'll like it. Michael, honey, the magician is doing his final trick, Caroline interjected, smoothly redirecting him. You don't want to miss it. Dad, there's food and drinks over at the tables. I watched them walk away, noting how Caroline kept a careful distance between us. The warmth of Michael's greeting had been the first genuine human connection I'd felt in weeks. Living alone at my age was something I was still adjusting to, especially after 43 years of marriage. Margaret had been my compass, my confidant, my critic and champion. Without her, social gatherings had become exercises in endurance rather than enjoyment. I made my way to the refreshment table, bypassing the champagne for a bottle of water. I'd given up drinking after Margaret's death, partly for health reasons, partly because alcohol only deepened the loneliness. Finding a relatively quiet spot under a large oak tree, I observed the party from a comfortable distance. The hired photographer circulated, capturing carefully curated moments. Servers replenished elegant food displays. Children laughed and played, most of them strangers to me, Michael's friends from his private school, and the children of Caroline and Richard's social circle. I spotted Lily, my 7-year-old granddaughter, playing with a group of girls near the rose garden. She hadn't noticed my arrival yet. They certainly know how to throw a party. The voice beside me belonged to an older woman I hadn't noticed approach. She had silver hair cut in a stylish bob, intelligent eyes, and a wry smile that suggested she might be as much an observer as a participant. "That they do," I agreed. "I'm Helen Pearson," she said, extending her hand. "Michael's other grandmother." "Frank Stevens," I replied, shaking her hand. "Good to meet you." "Ah, Caroline's father, I've heard about you." Something in her tone made me think what she'd heard might not have been entirely complimentary. "All good things, I hope," I said lightly. Helen laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "Let's just say our children have interesting perspectives on their parents. I find it's best to form my own opinions." There was something refreshing about Helen's directness. Richard's mother had died before I'd met him, and his father rarely made appearances at family functions, preferring his retirement community in Palm Beach. "And what brings you to the Observer's Corner?" I asked. "Same as you, I imagine. These parties aren't really designed for grandparents. We're expected to make an appearance, bestow a suitable gift, and not interfere with the carefully orchestrated proceedings." She gestured toward the professional party planner who was now arranging children for a group activity. "Sounds about right," I admitted. "Things were simpler when Caroline was growing up. Birthday parties meant homemade cake in the backyard, pin the tail on the donkey, and maybe a trip to the local ice cream shop if it was a milestone year." "I raised 3 boys on a teacher's salary," Helen nodded. "Their birthday parties consisted of pizza, a homemade cake, and whatever neighborhood kids could pile into our station wagon for a trip to the bowling alley." We shared a laugh, and for the first time since arriving, I felt myself relax slightly. Helen was clearly from a different world than Caroline and Richard's usual associates, perhaps a reminder that Richard hadn't always been surrounded by wealth. Our conversation was interrupted by the party planner's amplified announcement that it was time for presents. Children and adults alike migrated to the gift table, where Michael was positioned in an ornate chair that resembled a throne, his friends seated on cushions before him, parents and relatives standing in a loose semicircle behind. I found a spot toward the back, Helen surprisingly choosing to stand beside me rather than claim her privileged position as grandmother. Michael's excitement was palpable as he began unwrapping his bounty, each gift more extravagant than the last. A new iPad, the latest gaming console, designer clothes, a drone with a camera, the motorized luxury children's car I'd spotted earlier. With each unveiling, appropriate oohs and ahs rose from the assembled guests. Caroline orchestrated the process with practiced efficiency, helping Michael read cards aloud, making sure each gift and giver received acknowledgement, passing opened presents to a young woman who was apparently tasked with recording who gave what. Richard stood nearby, occasionally commenting on particularly impressive gifts or joking with the other fathers about technology making kids grow up too fast. As the pile dwindled, I noticed my blue-wrapped box had somehow migrated to the bottom. Whether by accident or design, I couldn't be sure. Finally, Michael reached for it, his face lighting up with recognition. "This one's from Grandpa Frank," he announced, examining the simple wrapping with interest. "Oh, that's nice," Caroline said, her tone shifting subtly. "Go ahead and open it, honey." Michael tore away the paper eagerly, revealing the polished wooden chest. His expression of genuine wonder made my heart swell as he ran his fingers over the intricate carvings and inlaid wood patterns. "Wow," he breathed. "Did you make this, Grandpa?" "I did," I confirmed. "There's a card that explains how it works. It has a special locking mechanism and secret compartments." Michael was already examining the box with fascination, trying to figure out how to open it. Several of his friends crowded closer, equally intrigued by something so different from the electronic gadgets and branded merchandise that dominated the gift table. "What a unique gift," one of the mothers commented, her tone making it clear that unique wasn't necessarily a compliment. I saw Richard glance at my gift, then at the other parents, a flash of embarrassment crossing his features before he masked it with a smile. "Frank's quite the craftsman," he said, a hint of condescension in his voice. "Makes these little projects in his workshop." "Little projects?" Helen murmured beside me, raising an eyebrow. "That chest is museum quality." I appreciated her support, but kept my expression neutral. Michael's excitement was all the validation I needed. He had opened the card and was now following my instructions, manipulating the hidden mechanisms that controlled the lock. "It's a puzzle box," he exclaimed as the lid finally clicked open. "Awesome! What did you put inside it?" Lily asked, having joined the circle of curious children. "That's for Michael to fill with his treasures," I explained. "But there's another secret compartment he has to find." This revelation caused even more excitement among the children, who were now fully invested in the mystery of the box, momentarily forgetting the electronic gadgets and expensive toys. Caroline, noticing the shift in attention, stepped in smoothly. "Okay, everyone, we need to move on if we want to have cake before the animals arrive for the petting zoo. Michael, you can explore Grandpa's box later. Why don't you thank everyone for your wonderful gifts?" Michael dutifully thanked the assembled guests, but clutched the wooden chest to his chest rather than adding it to the pile of opened presents. "Can I keep this with me, Mom? I want to figure out the secret compartment." Before Caroline could answer, Richard interjected. "Son, let's put it with your other gifts for now. The animals are going to be here any minute, and you don't want to miss that. Cost a fortune to get that baby kangaroo here, you know." Reluctantly, Michael surrendered the box to the young woman cataloging gifts. I noticed he whispered something to her, probably asking her to be careful with it. The thought warmed me. At least my grandson appreciated the time and care that had gone into his gift. As the party transitioned to the next elaborately planned activity, I found myself drifting toward the periphery again. The contrast between Michael's genuine enthusiasm for my handmade gift and the adult's barely concealed dismissal left me feeling both vindicated and dejected. I'd created something meaningful for my grandson, something that engaged his imagination and curiosity. But in this world of conspicuous consumption, it registered as inadequate, even embarrassing. "Your gift was the highlight," Helen said, rejoining me as servers began cutting the elaborate castle cake. "I haven't seen Michael that excited about anything in a long time." "Thank you," I replied simply. "I'm glad he liked it." "Children have an uncanny ability to recognize authenticity," she observed. "Something made with love and skill will always mean more than whatever expensive gadget happens to be popular this month." I nodded, appreciating her insight. We watched as Michael, now surrounded by friends eager for cake, kept glancing toward the gift table where my chest sat among the electronic devices and designer items. "Have you eaten?" Helen asked. "The food is actually quite good, despite the pretentious presentation." "Not hungry," I admitted. The tension of the afternoon had dampened my appetite. "Well, I'm starving," she declared. "Teaching high school English for 30 years taught me never to pass up free food. Join me?" I found myself smiling at her frankness. "Lead the way." We filled plates from the gourmet buffet and found seats at one of the elegantly decorated tables. Helen was right. The food was excellent, though I doubted many of the guests truly appreciated the difference between the imported charcuterie and what could be found at the local deli. Our conversation flowed easily, covering our respective careers, shared experiences as grandparents, and gentle observations about the elaborate party surrounding us. Helen had a sharp wit and an unpretentious manner that I found refreshing. I learned she'd been widowed 3 years ago after a long, happy marriage to a civil engineer, another parallel in our lives. "Frank, Helen, you two found each other, I see." Caroline approached our table, her social smile firmly in place though her eyes betrayed tension. "Dad, I've hardly had a chance to catch up with you. How have you been?" "Can't complain," I replied, my standard answer that bypassed the truth of my increasingly solitary existence. "Michael seems to be having a wonderful time. You and Richard have done an amazing job with the party." "We try," she said, accepting the compliment as her due. Though sometimes I think we go overboard. The expectations get higher every year, you know. The Hendersons had live penguins at their daughter's party last month. Heaven forbid you only have a baby kangaroo, Helen remarked dryly. Caroline's smile tightened. Richard likes to make occasions memorable. I'm sure Michael will remember this day for a long time, I offered, trying to ease the sudden tension. Speaking of memories, Caroline said, turning more fully toward me, I've been meaning to ask you about Mom's china. Lily's getting interested in cooking, and I thought she might appreciate having her grandmother's collection someday. The request caught me off guard. Margaret's fine china, a wedding gift from her parents, was one of the few valuable possessions I'd kept after downsizing. It wasn't just the monetary value. Those plates and serving dishes held memories of family dinners, holiday gatherings, and the home we'd built together. I still use it occasionally, I said carefully, but I'd be happy to set it aside for Lily when she's older. Actually, I was thinking we could take it now, Caroline pressed. We have plenty of storage space, and it would be safer in our climate-controlled attic than in your current place. The slight hesitation before current place spoke volumes about how she viewed my apartment. Before I could respond, Richard's voice cut through the ambient party noise. He was standing near the gift table with several other fathers, a glass of scotch in hand, speaking just loudly enough that his words carried to our table. I mean, who brings a wooden box to a 10-year-old's birthday? Kids today want technology, not some handmade thing, one of the other men laughed. At least it didn't cost you anything. Exactly, Richard exclaimed, too loud, too loose from alcohol. Caroline warned me. She said he'll probably bring something he made in his little workshop because he couldn't even buy a proper gift. Laughter rippled through the small group, oblivious to how sound carried across the garden. Time seemed to stop. I felt the blood drain from my face, then rush back in a hot wave. Helen's hand touched my arm in silent support, her expression one of shocked sympathy. But it was Caroline's reaction that cut deepest. Rather than embarrassment or apology, her face showed mortification at being caught, not at what had been said. "Dad," she began, her voice low and urgent. I raised a hand to stop her. "I think I've heard enough." Standing slowly, I placed my napkin beside my barely touched plate. The party continued around us, children laughing, servers circulating, music playing, but in our small bubble, a seismic shift had occurred. "I should go," I said quietly. "Don't be dramatic," Caroline hissed, glancing around to ensure we weren't creating a scene. "Richard's had a few drinks. He didn't mean anything by it." "Didn't he?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, trying to reconcile the woman before me with the child I'd raised. "And what about you? Did you mean it when you laughed about me not being able to buy a gift?" Her silence was answer enough. "Your mother and I sacrificed everything to give you opportunities," I continued, keeping my voice steady with effort. "We paid for Yale without a second thought because we believed in you. We supported every dream, every ambition. And now you mock me because I've fallen on hard times?" "It's not like that," Caroline protested weakly. "You don't understand the pressure, the expectations in our circle." "Your circle," I corrected. "Not mine, never mine." Helen stood as well. "Frank, I'll walk with you to your car." Caroline's eyes widened at this unexpected alliance. "Helen, please." "Not now, Caroline," Helen said firmly. "You and Richard have guests to attend to. I think Frank and I could use some air." Without waiting for a response, Helen gently guided me away from the table, through the garden, and toward the front of the house. We walked in silence, the sounds of the party fading behind us. When we reached my old truck, I leaned against it, suddenly exhausted. The confrontation had drained what little energy I'd mustered for the social occasion. "I'm sorry," Helen said simply. "Not your fault," I replied. "No, but I'm sorry nevertheless. What Richard said was cruel, and Caroline's role in it even more so." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further about my daughter's betrayal. The pain was too fresh, too raw. "That chest you made for Michael," Helen continued, "it's exceptional craftsmanship. Anyone with an ounce of sense would recognize its value goes far beyond whatever price tag the other gifts carried." "Thank you." I managed a small smile. "It was 3 weeks of evenings, kept me company." Helen studied me for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "You know, I teach an arts enrichment program at the community center in Stratford. We're always looking for instructors who can share traditional skills with young people. Woodworking would be a wonderful addition." The offer was kind, but I wasn't in a place to consider new ventures. I appreciate the thought, but I should get going. Of course, she said, reaching into her purse for a business card, but take this just in case. No pressure. I accepted the card, tucking it into my pocket more out of politeness than intention. It was nice meeting you, Helen, under better circumstances, I mean. Likewise, Frank, she hesitated, then added, don't let today diminish what you've created. Not just the chest, though that's extraordinary, but the relationship with your grandson. Michael adores you. That's worth more than all the expensive gadgets in the world. Her words touched something deep within me, a reminder that despite Caroline and Richard's dismissal, I still had value to offer. I nodded, unable to articulate my gratitude. As I drove away from the sprawling estate, emotions warred within me, humiliation, anger, heartbreak, and beneath it all, a slow-burning resolve. My daughter's betrayal cut deep, but Helen's recognition of my worth had planted a seed. Perhaps there was still a way forward, a path to reclaiming not just my dignity but my purpose. The next week passed in a haze of hurt and reflection. Caroline called twice, leaving voicemails that started with justifications and ended with perfunctory apologies. I couldn't bring myself to return her calls. The wound was too fresh, the realization that my own daughter viewed me with such contempt too painful to process. I busied myself with small projects in my workshop, though my heart wasn't in the careful joinery and detailed carving that usually brought me peace. My thoughts kept returning to the moment of public humiliation, to Richard's casual cruelty and Caroline's complicity. More than the financial struggles of recent years, more than the loneliness of widowhood, this betrayal by my only child left me feeling hollowed out. On Thursday evening, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, assuming it was another telemarketer, but something prompted me to answer. Mr. Stevens, this is Helen Pearson. We met at Michael's birthday party. Her voice brought an unexpected lift to my spirits. Yes, of course. Hello, Helen. I hope I'm not disturbing you, she continued. I've been thinking about your woodworking, and I wanted to follow up on our conversation. Our arts program director is very interested in the possibility of you teaching a workshop. That's kind, but I'm not really a teacher, I demurred. Just a hobbyist these days. Nonsense, Helen said firmly. I saw that chest you made. That's not hobbyist work, that's master craftsmanship. Our kids would benefit enormously from learning even basic skills from someone with your experience. Her confidence in my abilities was flattering, but the thought of standing before a group of strangers, trying to articulate the knowledge I'd gained through decades of hands-on work, was daunting. I don't know, just come talk to us, she pressed gently. No commitment. We're having a planning meeting for the fall semester tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock at the Stratford Community Center. You know where that is? On Main Street, yes. The center was only a few blocks from my apartment. Perfect. Just stop by, meet the team, see if it might be a good fit. Her tone grew softer. Frank, I think this could be good for you, and definitely good for our students. After we hung up, I sat with the invitation, turning it over in my mind. Part of me wanted to retreat further into isolation, to nurse the wounds inflicted at the birthday party. But another part, perhaps the part that had built a business from nothing, that had faced the challenges of the recession with determination, recognized an opportunity to reclaim some sense of purpose. The next day, I found myself walking into the Stratford Community Center, a renovated school building that now housed various community programs. The lobby bustled with activity, senior citizens gathering for a book club, teenagers heading toward a music room, young mothers with toddlers attending what appeared to be a play group. Following the directory, I made my way to a classroom where several people sat around a large table covered with program materials and scheduling charts. Helen spotted me immediately, her face lighting up with a genuine smile that made me glad I'd come. Frank, you made it, she said, approaching to shake my hand warmly. Everyone, this is Frank Stevens, the master woodworker I was telling you about. I felt a flush of embarrassment at the grand introduction. Just a contractor who enjoys woodworking, I corrected. Don't let him fool you, Helen told the group. His craftsmanship is extraordinary. Frank, meet our team. Maria is our program director, David handles scheduling and facilities, and these are some of our current instructors. The next hour passed in surprisingly comfortable conversation about the community arts program. I learned they offered classes for all ages, from elementary school children to seniors, with a particular focus on preserving traditional crafts and skills. Their current offerings included quilting, pottery, basic drawing, and watercolor painting, but no woodworking since their previous instructor had moved to Florida. We've had requests for woodworking classes for years, Maria explained, especially from parents of boys who need constructive outlets for their energy, but finding someone with the skills and patience to teach beginners is challenging. I've never taught formally, I admitted. Not sure I'd know where to start. Start with what you love about it, suggested David, a retired high school shop teacher. That passion is contagious. The technical skills can be broken down into manageable lessons. As the meeting progressed, I found myself warming to the idea. These people shared a genuine commitment to their community and to passing on valuable skills to younger generations. There was no pretense, no judgment about my circumstances, just appreciation for what I could potentially contribute. By the end of the meeting, I had tentatively agreed to consider teaching a beginner's woodworking class for middle school students in the fall. Maria provided materials about their instructor requirements and compensation, modest but fair, and David offered to show me the workshop space they had available. The workshop was smaller than my own, but well-maintained, with basic tools and workbenches. As David pointed out features and potential improvements, I found myself mentally planning how I would arrange the space for teaching, what beginner projects might work well, what safety protocols would be essential. You're already thinking like an instructor, David observed with a knowing smile. Force of habit, I replied. I ran crews for decades, always planning, organizing. That experience will serve you well with a room full of 12-year-olds, he laughed. After touring the facility, I rejoined Helen, who was gathering her things to leave. What do you think? She asked. Can we tempt you to join our merry band of artisans? I'm considering it, I admitted. It's been a while since I felt useful. Something in my tone must have revealed more than I intended. Helen's expression softened. The right work at the right time can be healing, Frank. Believe me, I know. After James died, going back to teaching saved me from drowning in grief. Her understanding, based on similar experience, resonated deeply. I'll let Maria know my decision by next week, I promised. Excellent. And now, since we're both free, would you join me for an early dinner? There's a decent Italian place around the corner. The invitation caught me off guard. I hadn't shared a meal with anyone outside of family obligations since Margaret's passing. But Helen's company had been a bright spot in recent days, her straightforward manner and genuine interest in my craftsmanship a balm to wounded pride. I'd like that, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Over pasta at a small family restaurant, our conversation flowed easily from the community center to our respective careers, our experiences of widowhood, and eventually to the situation with our children. Helen had 3 sons, 2 successful and attentive, one struggling with addiction issues that strained their relationship. Parenthood doesn't end, she reflected, twirling linguine on her fork. The nature of the job changes, but the heart's investment remains constant, even when they disappoint us. Caroline was always driven, I said, finding myself opening up about my daughter for the first time since the birthday party. From childhood, she had ambitions beyond our middle-class existence. Margaret and I encouraged her to dream big, to pursue opportunities we never had. Maybe that was our mistake. Wanting better for our children isn't a mistake, Helen countered. But sometimes better gets confused with more expensive or more prestigious. Richard comes from wealth, but his values, well, you've seen his values. I nodded, thinking of my son-in-law's casual cruelty, his equation of worth with wealth. What bothers me most is seeing those values taking root in Caroline. The daughter I raised would never have laughed at someone for not being able to afford an expensive gift, especially her own father. People adapt to their environments, Helen said thoughtfully. Sometimes that means adopting the worst aspects of the culture around them. The question is whether that adaptation is complete or if the core person remains intact beneath the surface. Her insight gave me pause. Was there still hope for the daughter I'd raised, somewhere beneath the polished exterior and social climbing? Or had she truly become someone who valued status and appearances above integrity and compassion? I haven't returned her calls, I admitted, not ready to hear justifications. Understandable, Helen nodded. Some wounds need time before bridges can be rebuilt, if they should be rebuilt at all. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, and by the time we finished our meal, I felt more at ease than I had in months. Helen's company offered something I hadn't realized I was missing: intellectual engagement, mutual respect, and the simple pleasure of connecting with someone who saw value in who I was, not what I owned or could provide. As we parted outside the restaurant, Helen surprised me by touching my arm gently. "Thank you for today, Frank. It's been a pleasure getting to know you better." "Likewise," I replied, meaning it. "Thank you for the invitation to dinner and to the community center." "I hope you'll say yes to the teaching position," she said. "But even if you don't, perhaps we could do this again sometime." The tentative question held possibilities I hadn't considered since Margaret's death. Not romance necessarily, it was too soon for both of us, but companionship, understanding, maybe even friendship. "I'd like that very much," I said. Driving home to my apartment, I felt a shift in my perspective. The humiliation at Michael's birthday party still stung, but it no longer seemed like the defining moment I'd initially perceived it to be. Instead, it was becoming a catalyst, painful but potentially transformative. The following morning, I woke with newfound clarity and purpose. After breakfast, I called Maria at the community center and officially accepted the position teaching woodworking to middle school students, starting in September. The decision felt right, a way to share my knowledge, to be of service, to create something meaningful from the ruins of my former life. With that settled, I turned my attention to another matter that had been weighing on me: Margaret's china. Caroline's request, though poorly timed and insensitively framed, wasn't entirely unreasonable. The fine china set was gathering dust in my cupboards, used perhaps once or twice a year when I hosted the few friends who still kept in touch. After careful consideration, I decided the china should go to Lily, but on my terms, not as a hasty transfer of assets from my unsuitable apartment to Caroline and Richard's climate-controlled attic. The set deserved better than to be stored away, and my relationship with my granddaughter deserved more thoughtfulness than that. I spent the day in my workshop, designing and beginning construction on a china cabinet sized perfectly for a young girl's room. It would be elegant but not imposing, crafted from cherry wood with glass doors to display the treasured pieces and a special drawer for the accompanying silver. The cabinet would grow with Lily, a piece she could take to her first apartment, her first home, a lasting connection to her grandmother and to me. As I worked, sketching designs and selecting wood, I felt Margaret's presence more strongly than I had in months. She had always been my greatest supporter, believing in my ability to build beautiful things even when my day job involved commercial structures rather than fine furniture. She would approve of this project, not just the craftsmanship but the intention behind it, the desire to create a legacy of love rather than resentment. 3 days into the china cabinet project, my phone rang. Caroline again. This time I answered. "Dad," she said, sounding relieved. "Finally, I've been so worried." "I'm fine," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Just needed some time." "About what happened at the party," she began. "Let's not do this over the phone," I interrupted. "Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow? Just you, not Richard." A pause. "Yes, of course. Where?" "The Landmark Cafe on Main Street in Stratford." 3 o'clock. "I'll be there," she promised, a note of uncertainty in her voice. The Landmark was a small, unpretentious coffee shop near my apartment, neutral territory where we could talk without the distractions and power dynamics of either of our homes. I arrived early, securing a quiet corner table and ordering a simple black coffee. Caroline arrived precisely at 3, dressed more casually than I was accustomed to seeing her, jeans and a sweater rather than her usual designer outfits. The small concession to the setting didn't go unnoticed. "Dad," she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek before settling across from me. "Thank you for meeting me." I nodded, waiting while she ordered a complicated coffee drink that wouldn't have been available in the diners and simple cafes of her childhood. When the server departed, an uncomfortable silence fell between us. "I owe you an apology," Caroline finally began. "What happened at Michael's party was inexcusable. Richard was out of line, and I should have defended you immediately." "But you didn't," I observed. "In fact, you were the one who made the comment he repeated about me not being able to afford a proper gift." She had the grace to look ashamed. "It was a thoughtless remark made in private. I never expected him to repeat it, especially not where you might hear. Would that make it better if I hadn't heard it? Caroline sighed, running a hand through her perfectly highlighted hair. No, of course not. It was wrong, period. I was wrong. Her admission surprised me. Caroline had never been quick to acknowledge fault, even as a child. Why did you say it? I asked, the question that had been haunting me. Do you really think so little of me now? No, God, no, Dad. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't know why I said it. It's just, everything in our world is so focused on appearances, on status. Richard's friends, their wives, they all judge each other constantly based on what they have, where they vacation, what schools their kids attend. It's exhausting trying to keep up. So you threw your father under the bus to keep up appearances? The words came out harsher than intended, but the hurt was still raw. Caroline winced. When you put it that way, it sounds terrible. And it was terrible. I got caught up in a world that measures worth by price tags, and I momentarily forgot everything you taught me about real value. I studied my daughter, trying to reconcile the woman before me with both the child I'd raised and the social climber who had mocked my financial circumstances. Helen's words about adaptation versus core identity echoed in my mind. The wooden chest I made for Michael, I said. It took 3 weeks of evenings. The materials cost was minimal, yes, but the time investment was substantial. The design was original. The joinery techniques date back centuries. That's the value I can still offer: craftsmanship, patience, knowledge. If you and Richard can't see beyond the absence of a price tag, that's your limitation, not mine. Michael treasures that chest, Caroline said quietly. He keeps it beside his bed. Richard tried to interest him in the new gaming system, but Michael spent hours figuring out all the secret compartments in your gift. He's been collecting special things to keep in it: rocks, feathers, a baseball signed by his favorite player. The information warmed me. At least my grandson recognized the value of something made with love and skill. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, I continued. About how we got here. When did money become the measure of a person's worth to you, Caroline? When did my value as your father become tied to my bank account rather than my character or the lifetime of love and support I've given you? She looked down at her elaborate coffee, untouched and cooling. It wasn't a conscious shift. After the recession, when your business struggled, I think I felt frightened by your vulnerability. You and Mom had always been so solid, so reliable. Seeing you face financial hardship made me confront my own economic insecurities. Then, when I married Richard, having access to wealth felt like a shield against those fears. Her insight surprised me. Perhaps she'd been doing some genuine reflection. But the shield became a wall, she continued. A wall between the values I grew up with and the lifestyle I embraced. Between the person I was raised to be and the person I became to fit into Richard's world. And which person are you now? I asked. Caroline met my gaze directly. I don't know anymore. But I know I don't like the woman who would hurt her father to impress people whose opinions shouldn't matter. Her candor opened a door I hadn't been sure would ever open again. Not to instant reconciliation, the wound was too deep for that, but to the possibility of understanding, perhaps eventually forgiveness. I've taken a position teaching woodworking at the Stratford Community Center, I told her, changing the subject slightly. Starting this fall, teaching? Caroline looked surprised. That's wonderful, Dad. I didn't know you were interested in teaching. Neither did I admitted. But an opportunity presented itself and it feels right. A chance to pass on skills that are becoming rare, to be useful again. You've always been useful, she said softly. I'm sorry if I ever made you feel otherwise. We talked for another hour, beginning the slow process of rebuilding trust. There were moments of tension, old patterns threatening to reassert themselves, but also glimpses of the daughter I remembered, thoughtful, perceptive, capable of growth. As we prepared to leave, I mentioned the china cabinet I was building for Lily. It's my way of passing your mother's china to the next generation, I explained. Not just the dishes themselves, but a piece of furniture worthy of them, something that connects Lily to her grandmother and to the craftsmanship that's been part of her family heritage. Caroline's eyes softened. She'll love that, Dad. It's so much more meaningful than just inheriting the dishes. That's what I thought. It should be ready in a few weeks if you'd like to bring her to see it when it's finished. I would, and maybe, she hesitated, maybe Michael could come to your workshop sometime. He's been asking about how you make things. The request was an olive branch, an acknowledgement of the special bond between me and my grandson. "I'd like that very much," I said. As we parted outside the cafe, Caroline hugged me, a real embrace, not the air-kiss social greeting she'd adopted in recent years. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I'll do better." "I know you will," I replied, hoping it was true. The following weeks brought a gradual shift in my life's trajectory. I completed Lily's china cabinet, a piece I was genuinely proud of, with delicate inlay work and perfectly balanced proportions. Caroline brought both children to my apartment to see it, and Lily's delight at having a grown-up piece of furniture made specifically for her was worth every hour of labor. Michael spent the afternoon in my small workshop, fascinated by the tools and techniques I demonstrated. His natural aptitude reminded me of myself at his age, curious about how things were constructed, eager to create with his hands. I showed him how to use a hand plane, explaining the grain of the wood, the satisfaction of shaving away precisely the right amount of material to create a perfect surface. By the end of the visit, we had plans for him to return for regular lessons, away from electronic devices and the pressures of his privileged environment. Richard remained distant, his pride wounded by the confrontation over his behavior at the party. Caroline later told me he'd been genuinely shocked by her insistence that they both apologize and make amends. Their marriage was experiencing strains as she began to question the values and social dynamics she'd accepted for years. I took no pleasure in their difficulties, but respected my daughter's emerging determination to reclaim aspects of herself that had been submerged in her pursuit of status and acceptance. My friendship with Helen deepened as we worked together preparing for the fall semester at the community center. We shared meals regularly, attended local concerts, and discovered a mutual love of historical architecture that led to weekend drives exploring Connecticut's small towns and their preserved buildings. Her perspective as a lifelong educator proved invaluable as I developed my woodworking curriculum, breaking down complex skills into teachable components for young learners. By the time September arrived, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined that painful day at Michael's birthday party. The humiliation that had seemed so devastating had become instead a turning point, the moment when pretense fell away, revealing both painful truths and new possibilities. My first woodworking class exceeded all expectations. 8 students, ranging from 11 to 14, filled the community center workshop with energy and enthusiasm. Their questions, their mistakes, their moments of discovery when a technique finally clicked, all reminded me of the joy I'd always found in creating, now multiplied through their experiences. "You're a natural teacher," Helen commented after observing my third session. "Those kids adore you. They adore making sawdust and noise," I corrected with a smile. "I'm just the facilitator." "Don't sell yourself short, Frank. You're giving them something precious, the confidence that comes from creating something with their own hands. In a world where most of them spend hours staring at screens, that's a rare gift." Her words echoed in my mind later that evening as I sat in my workshop, finishing a small jewelry box for her birthday. The past months had brought unexpected gifts, new purpose, deepening friendship, reconciliation with my daughter, stronger bonds with my grandchildren. None of these changes had come easily, and none had erased the financial realities of my situation. I still lived in the same modest apartment, still drove the aging pickup, still watched my limited retirement funds with careful attention. But my sense of worth was no longer tied to these external measures. The humiliation Richard had intended to inflict, and that Caroline had unwittingly enabled, had instead forced a reckoning, clearing away false values to reveal what truly mattered. My skills, my knowledge, my capacity to create and to teach, these were assets no economic downturn could diminish, no social slight could devalue. The following spring, nearly a year after the birthday party incident, I received an unexpected visit from Richard. He arrived at my apartment unannounced, looking uncomfortable and out of place in his luxury sedan and tailored clothes. "Frank," he said stiffly when I opened the door, "do you have a few minutes to talk?" Surprised, I invited him in, curious about what could have prompted this unprecedented solo visit. My apartment, though small, was well kept and featured several pieces of my finest furniture, a testament to the skills I'd honed over decades. Richard glanced around, his eyes lingering on a walnut dining table I'd recently completed. "This is not what I expected," he admitted. "These pieces are impressive." "Thank you," I replied, gesturing for him to sit. "What can I do for you, Richard?" He perched on the edge of my sofa, clearly uncomfortable. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "What I said at Michael's birthday party last year was inexcusable. I was drunk, showing off for friends, but that's no excuse. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." The apology seemed rehearsed but not insincere. I nodded, acknowledging his words without immediately accepting them. "What brought this on after nearly a year?" Richard sighed, running a hand through his expertly styled hair. "Several things. Caroline, for one, she's changed since that day. Started questioning everything about our lifestyle, our values. It's been challenging, to say the least." I hid a smile, proud of my daughter's evolution. "And the other reasons? Michael, actually." Richard looked genuinely perplexed. "He's been spending Saturdays with you in your workshop, learning woodworking. It's all he talks about, the projects you're teaching him, the techniques, the history of it all. Last week, he showed me a small box he made entirely himself." "He's got natural talent," I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. "Patient, detail-oriented, rare in a kid his age." "The thing is," Richard continued, "I couldn't have made that box. With all my education, my resources, I couldn't create something like that with my own hands. It made me realize there are different kinds of value, different kinds of wealth. I've been successful in my world, but your skills, what you've taught Michael, that's a different kind of legacy." His admission surprised me. I'd never expected Richard to acknowledge any measure of worth beyond financial success. "Michael deserves the credit. He works hard, asks good questions, takes after his grandmother that way." Richard nodded, then hesitated before continuing. "There's something else. I'm facing some professional challenges. The market's been volatile. Some investments haven't performed as expected. For the first time in my career, I'm dealing with serious setbacks." The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had mocked my financial difficulties was now facing his own. But I took no pleasure in his predicament. Economic hardship was something I wouldn't wish on anyone, having experienced its harsh realities firsthand. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "Financial struggles test more than your bank account. They test your character, your relationships, your sense of self." "I'm discovering that," he admitted. "Caroline suggested I talk to you, said you might have perspective I could use." "Me?" I couldn't hide my surprise. "I'm hardly a financial advisor." "Not about money," Richard clarified. "About resilience, starting over, finding value beyond the balance sheet. You lost nearly everything but maintained your dignity, your skills, your relationships with your grandchildren. That's impressive." The compliment, so at odds with his previous assessment of my worth, reflected a fundamental shift in perspective. Whether born of genuine insight or desperate circumstances, it opened a door to a different kind of relationship between us. For the next hour, we talked, really talked, for perhaps the first time. About the recession that had devastated my business, about the difficult choices I'd made to preserve what mattered most, about finding purpose beyond professional identity. I shared experiences I'd never thought would interest him, and he listened with unexpected attentiveness. "The hardest part," I told him, "wasn't losing the money or the business. It was the loss of identity, of purpose. For 35 years, I was Frank Stevens of Stevens Construction. Then suddenly I wasn't. Finding new meaning, new ways to contribute, that's what saved me." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "I've been defined by my success for so long, I'm not sure who I am without it." "You're still a father, a husband," I reminded him. "Those roles matter more than any professional title or bank balance." When he finally left, something had shifted between us, not friendship exactly, but a mutual respect that had been entirely absent before. As I closed the door behind him, I reflected on the strange journey of the past year, how humiliation had ultimately led to unexpected growth for everyone involved. The following weekend, Caroline, Richard, and both children came for dinner at my apartment, the first time they had all visited together. Helen joined us, bringing her warmth and gentle wit to ease any lingering tensions. We ate at my handcrafted walnut table, using Margaret's china, which Lily had insisted on bringing from the cabinet I'd made her. The conversation flowed more easily than I would have expected, touching on Michael's woodworking projects, Lily's upcoming dance recital, and the community center's expanding arts program. Richard was quieter than usual, still adjusting to his changing circumstances, but made genuine efforts to engage beyond the superficial topics that had dominated previous family gatherings. After dinner, as the children helped clear dishes, Caroline pulled me aside. "Thank you for today, Dad, for welcoming all of us, including Richard." "Family is family," I said simply. "Imperfect as we all are." She smiled, her expression reminiscent of the daughter I'd always known was there beneath the social veneer. "We've been talking about downsizing. The house is too big, too expensive to maintain with Richard's current situation. It's scary but also clarifying in a way." "Change usually is," I agreed. "You'll find your way through it." "I know we will," she said with newfound confidence. After all, I had a pretty good role model for navigating difficult transitions with dignity. Her words warmed me deeply. The journey from humiliation to redemption had been neither quick nor easy, but standing in my modest apartment surrounded by family, I felt a profound sense of contentment. The wooden chest I'd crafted for Michael's birthday, the gift that had been mocked for its lack of monetary value, had become a symbol of what truly mattered. The ability to create, to teach, to pass on not just objects, but values that would outlast any fortune. Later that evening, after everyone had gone, Helen helped me wash the last of Margaret's china. "Quite a transformation from last year," she observed, carefully drying a delicate teacup. "Life rarely follows the path we expect," I replied. "Sometimes humiliation can be a doorway to something better." "You turned it into one," Helen corrected, her eyes meeting mine with warmth and understanding. "That's the difference. Many people would have retreated into bitterness, cut ties, held grudges. You chose to build something new instead, just like you've always done." Her insight, as always, cut to the heart of the matter. The skills that had defined my professional life, building, creating, transforming raw materials into something of value, had ultimately served me in rebuilding my personal life as well. From the ruins of humiliation and betrayal, I had constructed something more authentic, more meaningful than what had been lost. As we stood side by side in my small kitchen, I felt profound gratitude for the unexpected gifts that had emerged from that painful moment at Michael's birthday party. Not just Helen's companionship or my renewed relationship with Caroline, but the deeper understanding that true worth can never be measured in dollars or social standing, only in the lives we touch, the skills we share, and the love we give without expectation of return. In the woodworking classes I now taught regularly, I often told my students that the most beautiful pieces emerge from the wood with the most challenging grain, the knots and burls that require patience, skill, and respect for the material's true nature. The same, I had discovered, was true of life itself. The most difficult moments, faced with courage and integrity, could reveal unexpected beauty and purpose. My grandson Michael still keeps that wooden chest beside his bed, filled with treasures that matter to him. And I keep the memory of that birthday party, not as a wound anymore, but as a reminder that sometimes being unable to buy a gift can lead to giving something far more valuable. The gift of authenticity, of resilience, and of wisdom hard-won through experience. Some lessons, after all, cannot be purchased at any price. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.